Thank you for joining us. This is Making It in Asheville. Each week we sit down with another Asheville artist, entrepreneur, creative maker. We ask them what they're making and how they are making it in Asheville. And we are your hosts. This is Tony.
And I'm Sarah.
And that's Sarah. And this week we are joined by Emily Copus, the founder of Carolina Flowers and Sadie's Market. Emily, how are you today?
I'm doing great.
Well, thank you for joining us. Sarah has spent the last, when did you see? On Saturday you went
I went out to Sadie's Market for the first time on Saturday. Yes.
And it's been nonstop. All she's been talking about is I can't wait for this interview. So we'll let you please introduce yourself, say hello, and then it'll be a nonstop barrage of questions for the next hour or so.
Oh, good. I'm Emily, and we have two companies, soon to be three, out here. We're based in Marshall, but most of our work takes place in Asheville or the greater Asheville area. So both companies are delivery-based companies. Carolina Flowers, we grow, arrange, and sell flowers direct to the consumer mostly via our website, but also we have custom services for weddings and things like that.
Wow.
And then Sadie's Market is an online grocery store and delivery business focused on local farm fresh food and locally made products from around the area. And we're working to open our first brick and mortar, which will include a grocery market and a deli and a bar. And that should be coming up in early 2021 with a small hotel upstairs in our building, the old Marshall Jail. Maybe I didn't tell you about the hotel.
I don't know, but oh my goodness, that sounds like a pretty light.
Mention the hotel.
Wow. That sounds like a lot, and that sounds so exciting. And I think I have a question about one of the very first things you said, which has to do with the flower business. So maybe we start there for a second. But a word that I think is surprising when people say that they sell flowers is that you grow the flowers.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us more about that. I mean, I just assumed, we lived in New York for a while. There were flowers on every corner. I assumed that there's some sort of like international giant warehouse of flowers and they come in on shipping containers from Netherlands or something. I don't know, Holland,
well,
right?
They do that. That does happen.
Okay.
But that's not what happens here.
Wow.
Fortunately. So flowers are a fresh, highly perishable product. And it is amazing to me that in the United States, we actually import 80% of the flowers that are sold here.
Whoa.
It's one of those statistics that feels very unnatural. When you think about how much work and resources go into moving flowers from South America and Holland and South Africa and Australia and domestically from California, which is less egregious, but still, I mean, compared to the amount of imports, California is just a tiny little piece. So you're not wrong about that. Most flower shops do use imported flowers primarily, but we are not that. We are our own supplier for the majority of the flowers that we sell. Not everything. We do work occasionally with imports when we have to, if a client requests it, and our educational techniques don't produce our most preferred outcome. We do work with imported flowers. But we are really trying to move the needle on locally grown flowers.
Amazing. And take us back to, because you weren't always a florist or a flower farmer. What did you do before that? And what was sort of the defining moment that led you into the flower business?
Yeah, so I a lot of times when you talk to a flower farmer, the story starts with, I've loved flowers and plants since I was a little girl, which is true. But I don't think that is very interesting. I think that most human beings are wired to love plants and flowers. In fact, it's a part of what it means to be a human, to love plants and flowers. You don't make it very far in the natural world if you're not really into plants, because you starve to death. So most people deep down have like a very natural love of flowers and plants. And so I do too, for sure. But my original career was in journalism, which I started doing when I was 19 for an alt weekly, and worked my way up from there. So by the time I finished in journalism, I was a local government reporter for the Asheville Citizen-Times, and I covered the 2016 election and the beginning of the sort of corruption cases coming out of Buncombe County government. And I think that, I knew that journalism had served its purpose for my life. And I think the election cycle really showed me that if the career was not serving me, it was certainly not serving any sort of larger purpose in the world. I really love local journalism and I support local journalism, but I think unfortunately the system is so broken that participating in that system sort of seemed like more harm than good to me at a certain point.
Sure. Yeah.
But kudos to the people who carry on. It's a personal choice. I don't want to make it sound like, I don't know, everyone should throw in the towel. That I don't know if that works either, but it shaped a lot of my thinking about business and economics, sort of watching that industry from the inside, just utterly tank over and over in so many different ways. It just really is fascinating how messed up it is. Perfect example of what not to do.
Sure. Yeah.
Journalism at large.
Well, not journalism at large. I should say daily newspapers, especially ones that are owned by large news groups like Gannett, which is what owns the Asheville Citizen-Times. I think that there's still lots of good journalism happening in the world. I think radio and podcasts are sort of the bright spot. But the institutional issues with print media, mass market print media and television are just really appalling. And not to detract from, like, I don't want to get all caught up in this whole media thing.
I mean, I
think that you can trust the media, but
well, and I think now we're seeing. I think this year is a really great example of that, and I don't want to get into all of that because that's not what this podcast is about. But
not do that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so you realized that journalism, media was no longer for you. Did you do something else before you got into how did you make that transition into the flower business?
It seems like a big transition.
Yeah,
so I saw it coming from pretty far away. The understanding that I was going to kind of outgrow that career path. And it's sort of strange because, I was in my 20s, it happened really quickly. And I think in a lot of people's minds, how can someone so young outgrow a career path that is so desirable to so many people, seemingly. But I did. And I could tell, I could tell it wasn't right for me. I think that the way we train people to pick careers in our culture is not great. I think for me, I had to start over and say, how do you physically like to spend time? What do you want to do with your body all day long? On the most elemental level of who are you? Do you like sitting or not? So if it were up to me, college career counseling, this is what I would do. I'd be like, all right, kids, I'm locking you in 8 hours. You can come out for 2 bathroom breaks and like 1 30-minute lunch break that you have to clock out for. And that's like, here's a computer. Let's see how you feel at the end of a week,
I love it.
Like, we're going to give you a phone and it's going to ring a lot, but like only when you're actually focused, and then someone is going to ask you a question that annoys you like that. And that's what we're going to do. And this is college counseling. Because I really think that we don't really ask people, to think about how they enjoy being in the world. And so for me, obviously, I like spending time outside, but it's more than that. I like having a lot of variety. I currently have so much variety in my life that I'm having to kind of reel it back in a little bit. But I really like changing tasks frequently. I really like thinking about big picture ideas and creating new ideas and seeing lots of different people during the day and talking to lots of different people. And so all of those things are super elemental, but and they seem really obvious, but when you're actually in it, it takes so long to just say, like, let's reduce who you are to like the most basic fundamental parts and then put them back together. So that's sort of what I did with to arrive where I arrived. And actually it was very when I finally asked the right questions, the answer was very obvious. And it's interesting because the same process kind of happened with Sadie's, where once you ask the right questions, your brain will kind of like spit out the answer in rapid fire. So the flower farm, took me over a year to kind of get to understanding what the business was that I wanted to start. Sadie's, it took 36 hours.
Wow.
So you get better at it, I guess. And so anyway, I read all these books. My favorite one is called How to Find Fulfilling Work. It's a British book. It's part of like a how-to series that's really like sort of quirky in a British way. I don't know, but it's written by they've commissioned philosophers from all over the world to write these. So it's sort of like contemporary philosophy light, which sounds really heady, but it's not. It was a fun book to read. And it has the scene from Anna Karenina in it, which happens to be probably my favorite novel story, not just novel story, where Levin, who is, I guess, the protagonist of Anna Karenina, is threshing wheat with the peasants. He's like a lord kind of guy, except he's Russian, so I don't know what that is. But anyway, he's like a Russian lord. And he goes away from his estate to like spend time in the fields and get to know like how the peasants function or whatever. So it's, I don't know, it's really like 19th century vibes, but still, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful scene. It's a beautiful piece of writing. And the How to Find Fulfilling Work book kind of riffs off that piece of writing. And so it just resonated with me. And while I was going through this whole, like, what am I going to do with my life kind of thing, I was spending all of my time gardening, which I did not notice.
Yeah.
I was just like doing my hobby or whatever. And then the moment that I realized that that was a job, it like hit me in the face like a ton of bricks kind of thing. Because my grandfather actually grew up on our family's flower farm, and my great-great-grandfather and great-grandfather were professional flower farmers. And so I don't know why it took me so long to see, like, of any person in this world, it should have occurred to me that that was a thing that I could do. But flower farming really is in a renaissance right now in the United States. And so, I think it probably also took some research and like, not research, that sounds fancy, exposure to that, sort of coming together at the same time to really, show me that it was worth doing.
Yeah. So, okay. So like, I don't know, like I'm imagining you're in your garden and like, you're suddenly like, oh my gosh, I can do this as a business or something to that effect.
Yeah.
But
well,
like,
it was exactly like that.
Okay.
I'd been working all day. I drove out to Marshall, which is where I was gardening. I was still living in Asheville at that point, drove all the way out here. and it started raining while I was working, and I was moving soil all around, which is a terrible thing to do in the rain. But I was so happy, and I think that that's what, doing something terrible and still being happy is, I think, part of what made me realize it was a great fit.
And so what were your next steps in actually opening a business and making it something where you could make money from?
Because it seems, and I'll pop in, because it seems like, a service business or let me buy commodities and have them in a market and have people show up, like hypothetically, those happen faster. The second you have the idea, you could theoretically start. But I imagine it takes a while to grow a flower. Like, I don't know how long a flower takes to grow, but I can't imagine it's a overly quick process to go from.
Or to set up a plot of land.
Yeah. So to go from, oh, this is a thing that gives me so much joy that even when it's raining, I'm so happy and fulfilled, to let me also put food on a table or pay my bills or whatever the basis is for start a business. I'm very excited to know what the next steps are.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think there's a little more backstory than that. First of all, I was ready to start a business, and I had all these ideas. I had my family still makes fun of me because there's this massive list. I was going to do like I had this whole thing about shoe repair for a while because nobody does it anymore, but it turns out there's a reason why. I had this whole thing about serving pancakes on the street, which is that's like a Portlandia episode. It's a terrible idea. I was like, oh, people do crepes. Why not pancakes? Because you can't eat pancakes with your hands, Emily.
Speak for yourself.
Terrible street food. I thought about starting the refrigerator repair company because electricians make a lot of money, and there's high demand for refrigerator repair services in Asheville, which is true.
True.
There is. Someone should do that.
Nationally, there's a business, it's like $100 million business that just does electronics repairs and magic. It's like the Uber for home appliance electronic repairs. I think that's a great idea. I love your mind.
Level, you hanging around restaurants, fix refrigerators, boom, you're welcome.
Yeah.
But I didn't do it because I sat in on an electrical certificate class at AB Tech. I went and did it. And I was like, I can't go back to school. I already have a master's degree in something. I'm done. So although now I'm going back to school for horticulture. I'm getting an MBA. I have all these things. I don't know. Anyway, but at that time, going back to school was not the right choice for me. I thought about it. I shadowed the classes. But not going to happen. So I was ready, though, to start the business. I don't know if I had already signed up for a small business class at Mountain BizWorks, but if I hadn't already signed up, I had the information in my folder kind of thing. I don't have folders. It's actually one of the worst things about me, but I don't know, bookmarked on my computer or whatever. So I was ready to start a business. And my husband and I had been together for about a year at that point, and he and I have very different entrepreneurial attitudes, but he was an independent, is an independent artist who makes 100% of his livelihood from being an artist and now a real estate developer. I don't know where the line between those two things is. Wow. So anyway, seeing him do it was really inspiring for a lot of different reasons. And then Josh is also my business partner in Sadie's, I should mention. And then a whole bunch of stuff just happened that year. I don't know. It was 2016. We bought a house. We moved to Marshall. We bought a jail, which is the building that we're renovating into Sadie's. We started a farm. We leased farm property. We built a barn. I don't know. 2016 was just a really good year for us, where we started all of these things that now, almost 5 years later, are maturing in major ways. So I don't know.
Well, I mean, where did you quit your job and then just go full steam ahead at this, or were you still kind of working on the side while you're like planning all of this? Like, do you remember that process of getting
Nope,
there?
I jumped right in. I did a lot of night farming. I probably did a lot of time theft, if we're being really honest about it. In terms of like, you know, reading about plants on the clock kind of thing. Because I spend a lot of time thinking about how, I don't know, how there are various points in a business where you have to figure out how to make something from nothing. And you go through these cycles where we're actually kind of in one at the moment where you have to like add up all your resources and then say to yourself, all right, these things don't add up. So you're going to have to find something else to get it from whatever it is you're trying to get. And so starting a business is like that. I mean, if you want to do it quickly anyway, I mean, you have to figure out how to get more time or more money or more resources, whatever. You have to like magic up something. And so, you know, I'm not proud of my time theft. Actually, it wasn't one of the reasons why I can't tell you the story. Never mind. Time theft, but it implicates a lot of other people at much higher levels than me. Like condoning this. I will say this time theft was condoned by management in like a very explicit way, and we'll leave it at that.
I love a number of things that have happened as you tell the story of testing the water, right? I think that if I'm talking in the abstract sense and like people at large have ideas for concepts of businesses or think that they have this incredible idea and typically will just like tell a friend or hold it in their heart. And I love that you went and sat in on an A/B tech course to attempt to validate a business model that you had or an assumption that you had about a business model. I would call that something like a superpower. I don't think most people go beyond the first step. And I think people who do typically will go past the first step into the second and the third, and there's like just a high success rate. So once you went into this first step of the economics, I'll assume, of a floral business or flower farming business, what assumptions were you bringing into that early model? Was it about the square feet of a farm and how much a flower costs, or was it how much life it'll give you and how much time it'll take? Like, how were you attempting to calculate that the flower business made more sense than trying to be a cobbler or a shoemaker?
That is a great question because I have a lot of very clear answers for that now. But if I'm being honest, I don't know if I did at the moment. And so I think that one of the most important things about being in business is understanding what a good idea feels like, which has taken me a long time to learn, but I'm very good at it now. And also being like the keeper of the dream, which sounds like woo-woo, but what I mean is something that is equal parts like analytical and creative energy. Because once you have the idea, everyone is going to tell you that it sucks. And no matter how good it is.
And the thing like that, like the thing that I've also seen is, or they'll tell you it's great until you ask them to pay for it, right? So it's like, oh, that's a great idea. Mm-hmm. Cool. It costs $20. And then they're like, well, so you mean like right now you want me to pay? Like, what about? And
or they'll say it's a great idea and hey, you should also try this, or like have you like try to give you advice on how to make it better.
And so it's either this is bad or it's great, but they won't pay, or here's me being a consultant and I have no idea what you're talking about. And all of those are.
Totally. We have a joke in our family called "You know what you should do," and that's the joke. Like any sentence that begins "You know what you should do" is like setting it up for joke, because like art and it's hilarious when someone does it with art, because art is so, you have to like kind of be an artist to make art. But with business too, any sort of, what you should do, it's just like,
Yeah,
this
and
is a great idea.
I have a huge one of my things is the word should. I think is like my enemy. I think should just creates so much anxiety or shame or whatever. Like if should shows up in a sentence, nothing good happened in that sentence. I think there's an opportunity to. I've seen a friend do this,
right?
But like to use the word like I should have or you should do. Ugh. Least favorite word.
Well, and it's tricky because I think if you don't have experience with what we're describing, like we could sound very arrogant right now, because if you are filtering other people's feedback, then how do you know when you're wrong, and how do you know when your idea is not a good idea? And so, it is tricky to be out all alone doing the thing. And at a certain point, you do have to, know when to fold them, kind of thing. But that is something I'm not good at. So I can't really speak to that. But somewhere theoretically, there's a point where you should say,
yes,
turn back.
Yeah. Well, have there been any points in your journey where you thought you had a great idea and then didn't really work out, or things that had an unexpected result?
Yes, for sure. I have had bad ideas. I actually, in some ways, it's hard to talk about this without giving away a whole lot of information about my business. But last year, I tried some things that were maybe not great ideas, or they weren't great ideas because I didn't push them quite far enough. So the outcome was not quite what I had hoped for in certain flower projects that I was working on at the farm. And so 2020 has been such a strange year for me. And I think a little bit of that explains why I reacted to COVID the way I did, is because I was sort of, scalded from a project last year that didn't go quite how I had hoped. And I felt like I didn't have any time to waste on COVID nonsense or whatever. So, I chalk up a lot of things in my business to tuition, because, I'm someone who is not or wasn't at a certain point a professional farmer. I think probably I am now. But yeah, I mean, you have to just write shit off to tuition. If you don't, you're going to lose your mind. So yes, I make all kinds of mistakes.
Yeah. I think that's part of being a business owner, is trying different things and seeing what's like, throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. And
right, of course.
Yeah.
Of course, because for me, one of the most important things that is, or one of the most worrisome things that is happening in small business and creative industries right now is the how-to movement, which is hugely lucrative for the people who are producing master classes and web classes and things like that. But I think that there is an argument that promoting homogenous business models is very, very, very bad. And sort of this idea that you can follow these steps and replicate what someone else has done in your own area or whatever, don't do it, do your research, but you gotta learn things for yourself, because if you don't try things that no one else is doing, or if you don't try things that other people have told you are bad ideas, you're not going to figure out your own niche. You wind up with this. It's the same thing in ecology. If the genetic diversity is not there, everything dies. So I feel very strongly that investing in mistakes
And I
is a
love
good
the
idea.
language that you used on chalking it up to tuition. I've not heard anyone say it in that way. I think that's really just strong, and that's going to stick with me. It's like that's education. That's the cost of learning the thing. The other thing that's coming up for me is that the concept of, and the idea that sometimes things don't work because of the timing, right? And so there's this very like impactful thought or concept that was told me once, which is like a baby elephant could be chained to like a spike in the ground, and there's like a chain and the spike, and when the elephant's a baby, that spike can hold them, and so it knows that it can't go further away from the spike than the chain's length, and then the full-grown elephant assumes that the chain to that same spike can also hold it and never tries to break away. And so it's like maybe it didn't work when you were, a 4-month-old business and you had never actually made a sale, or you hadn't made much in sales. If you tried it again 2 years later or 4 years later, don't write it off because it didn't work the first time. Also, I think that a lot of love and a lot of business is timing.
Right, of course, and the fact that even though we think of ourselves as like, I am Carolina Flowers, this is our business, the resources and the people involved and the infrastructure and the staff, I mean, it's constantly changing. And so, just like the elephant is changing, a lot of my issues, past and present, have to do with like tweaking staffing levels and labor ratios and things like that are very, very specific to a point in time. So I agree with that completely.
So thinking about if you had to identify different milestones in your business, what would those be looking back?
I don't know. That's a tricky question for me because I don't really see, like it feels like one continuous thread that's still going somewhere else to me. And I would say, we doubled our growing space at the beginning of 2019, and that was a big deal. We also bought a brand new tractor last year, which was a big deal for the farm. In the beginning of this year, we launched our functional online sales platform. We've had different ones, but we launched the sort of model that we are working with now. And that's been a huge deal. And boy, did we nail the timing on that one. Not on purpose, just it happened to be that we were set up to sell through our website direct to the consumer and fulfill with our own delivery services right when COVID hit.
Wow.
So that was very lucky. Starting Zadies and committing to keeping Zadies and sort of building out a managerial staff is probably the thing that I'm most proud of, and we are still working on that. But that is the milestone that will change our company forever. So
I think that's right.
I don't know when that.
When you think about your business, do you think about Zadies and Carolina Flowers as somehow like separate things, or do you see them as a continuation of the same thing somehow or another? Like a vertically integrated beauty business, right? You're in the business of growing beauty, selling beauty, delivering beauty, and there's a platform now that allows you to, execute commerce of beautiful things. Like I'm using beauty as a placeholder for whatever you might think, but is that how you're thinking of it right now, or are they one's a market and one's a flower shop?
Nope, they very much piggyback off of each other. And one of the really interesting things about building our companies this way is that the sharing information across the two product lines, and looking at, how do flowers and groceries align? How do they differ? That stuff is really important. And then just being able to invest and dial in all of the skills and systems that go along with selling and distributing the way that we do. They absolutely feed off of each other in really remarkable ways. And there's so much crossover. I like the idea that we're in the beauty business because we talk about, one of the taglines for Zadie's is that it's beautiful food, is how we sum it up. But of course, we mean that more than just aesthetically. We mean that essentially in terms of how it's produced. But yes, it's a fresh, perishable product that has handling requirements that you have to understand and build systems around. It, gets distributed directly to the consumer. We're working within the same market. So insights about our market apply to both companies. And so, well, there are some exceptions to that actually, but, it's really good to have both. And it allows us to bring in different types of minds in a way, if that makes sense. The grocery business has this really systematic aspect, because we're not producing those products ourselves, we're buying them in. That has been tremendously positive for Carolina Flowers. Farming is the anti-system. It's, working with nature is a great way to show you that systems are silly. But at the same time, you have to. You can't run a business without that. But trying to, Zadie's is a really controlled environment in terms of how much noise there is in the system, whereas Carolina Flowers, there's so much noise, it's constant. But working with a system that's clean and then trying to apply it to a dirtier sort of application, if that makes sense, has been really good for my brain.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was
no. I understand. It's the flowers are so unpredictable, whereas you can get so many bags of crackers or whatever it is because the producer says, "Yeah, I have that many, and I can send them to you." And so, it's more fixed for sure.
And when there's chaos and noise in the system on the Zadie's end, we're really good at dealing with it because we're you can't get toilet paper. We just do this other thing instead. Because we're used to that.
So talk to us a little bit about, you said you set up this online shop, and I'm curious to learn more about what softwares and applications you use for online store and inventory, if you're open to sharing.
Yeah, we started out on Squarespace. That was just where our website was, and so we were not prepared for the volume that we were going to wind up doing, and so we switched sort of in midstream over to Shopify, which is what we use now, along with a bunch of other complementary software. And I do all of our web stuff myself, which that was a journey to arrive at that conclusion that was how that needed to be. And I may not always, but I think we will probably keep it all in house, just because it's really important to be nimble right now.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you following along at home, I think that's a great transition. I think that Squarespace is typically the fastest, easiest, and most beautiful, fastest, easiest version of a website you can build. Gives you a ton of capacity. You could sell stuff. You could sell classes. You could just have a website that's a business card. But once you start doing volume on retail or e-commerce, it seems like a transition to a Squarespace or WooCommerce or something even more complex is all but necessary. And so Shopify is intuitive also. It's just not as necessarily beautiful out of the gate as a blog website from day one. Do you feel the same about that?
Yeah, although I mean, just spend money on stuff and it's worth it. And Shopify, like, buy all the premium stuff and like, get a consultant and spend an hour on the phone and pay for that and like do all that stuff. It pays off, especially compared with having things done by other people. Like, having a web developer do it all for you. I think obviously I am from a certain time. I qualify, I think, as a digital native, meaning that I don't have a lot of like training in computers, but I am really good at it. Like one time I had a coding job for the Biltmore, which is hilarious because like I don't know anything about coding, but I was like, whatever, I'm a millennial, like I just fix this coding, like it's not hard. I don't know. Yeah, there's like a bunch of people who hate me who are like professionals that hate me for saying this, but I don't know. I think that for me, like I wasted a lot of money because I didn't trust myself to just really handle the whole website myself. Like I explored having someone else do it, and $4,000 later, with nothing to show for it, I changed course and took the project and I did it myself. That's
Yikes.
like a long and embarrassing story that no one wants to hear.
Tuition.
But like,
yeah, I mean, sometimes there are people that like you, like okay, I can do this, or I have a specific vision, and so it's better for me to just handle it. And then there are other things that like I think it varies from person to person. Is what I'm trying to say is that there are other things that you might automatically just say like, I'm going to outsource this, or like have someone else do it because I don't enjoy doing it. I don't know how to do it. I don't have a vision for it. I just need to get it done.
Right. Yeah. And I think that I thought that I was doing that with this, but just the cost benefit of doing it myself and like the amount of time it takes. Sometimes I don't think that people are trying to nickel and dime you necessarily, but I think that there is a convention in sort of technology-centric professions of billing really high and not really providing a lot of value because you don't think your client understands what's happening, and they're like baby boomer who probably doesn't understand what's happening. And yeah, but just I don't know, if you think that someone is not taking your project seriously, you're probably right.
Yeah.
I think it's a very fair statement. So so you're on Shopify now, and you had made that transition just before COVID. I'm wondering, just so I have the timeline as clearly as possible, did you already own the space that Zades is in and this prison for like 3 years at this point?
So
jail.
First of all, it's a jail. Crucial difference. Prison is like Shawshank Redemption. That's where you go to do hard time. The jail, our jail had real criminals and like terrible things happen in it, but a jail is pre-trial holding. So, you may just go in there to kind of like sleep it off and like, a Mayberry kind of way, or you may be like a serious, creep. But yes, our jail, that was another 2016 originating project. And we bought it in 2016. Well, my husband, has been the driving force behind it. And I think that, one of the reasons why we are so compatible is because it didn't occur to me to like ask any questions about why he was buying a jail. Like, I don't know. I was just like, okay, great, do that. But we don't own it alone. We own it with, we have 3 investors who own it with us, and they're great partners. They have various levels of involvement. One of them is super involved, and the other 2 are more like, step in here and there. So we bought it at an auction from Madison County. And it was built in 1905 and continuously operated as a jail until 2012. So when it closed, it was the oldest operating jail in the state of North Carolina. And boy, did it look it. Like, the interior was redone in the 40s and it had not changed a whole lot since then. But it's a fascinating building. It is kind of a time capsule. It has all these layers of history in its bones even. So the walls are from 1905, but there's a steel and concrete structure that was built inside of it in the 40s when the United States got all zooped up on the military industrial complex, and like, you know, everybody was doing steel rivets and stuff. And like there's like crazy pulleys and levers and handles and and then there's an addition from the 70s, which is totally different kind of architecture that we renovated into this like modern wing of the building that'll be wrapped in Corten steel and look really architecturally distinct. And now our renovation is sort of the next layer. And my husband, who is an artist, has worked with the community to create thousands of custom bricks. So they say whatever people wanted to write in them. And they'll wrap the first floor of the addition in this patio area. So it's got this sort of like many hands built this and worked on this and infused it with meaning. So it's this like collaborative project and this thread of history, the history of Appalachia, really, that you know, we feel fortunate to be stewards of, but we are just one of many chapters. And Zadie's will go in that building, which a year ago was out of the question. I had said no. Like, we will be landlords and we will have great tenants. And that was my shtick on that property. And you know, nothing like a global pandemic to make you eat your words.
2 questions. You said a brick thing. Sarah and I went to the Asheville Museum of Art.
The art museum.
Yeah. Was it like a staircase in the middle of one of the rooms? Is that, wow. Okay. That's your husband.
Okay. I was thinking the same thing and I wasn't sure either. Yeah. So
amazing.
If anyone's listening, if you went to the Asheville Art Museum, that was
it was like about a year ago. Was it autumn of 2019? Cool.
So Josh started making these bricks mostly in 2017. I mean, he's been making bricks for a million years, like since he was in art school. But he started making these bricks associated with this property in 2017, and he actually got a grant from the Wingate Foundation to set up outside of the building for months. Sort of a blur, and make these things with the community. And the installation at the art museum was one of a couple that he's done as temporary installations using these bricks, but their permanent home will be at our building. They're actually there now getting installed. He just put some in the walls for the first time the other day.
That's very cool. And I love just another example of how a small town becomes smaller the more conversations that you have with people. Because that was like such a, like, you know, I don't remember anything else about that room except for those stairs and the bricks. And then the other thing is we've had a couple conversations about, in some form or another, over the history of the podcast, about buying a piece of real estate with the intention of letting it out or having it be a commercial ownership. And I just love, with like broad strokes, what is it like to buy a building with investors? Or like, is it a traditional mortgage? Did you start a business to buy the jail? Like, loosely, how does somebody buy a jail? It's like you bought it at an auction. I don't understand anything about what just happened.
We bought it and there was no like gavel, like it wasn't that kind of auction. It's an upset bid process. So it's the same way that you buy a foreclosure in most areas, where you go to the courthouse and you like file your bid, and then there's 10 days and someone else can come in and make a bid, but there's no like
sold. None of that. Okay.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah, there wasn't any of that, unfortunately. Yeah, so the funny thing about this story is that the building was newsworthy enough that it sort of came up in all these meetings at the newspaper while I was working there. And my colleagues would be like, we got to figure out who's in this, like, who's making these bids, like what's happening. And I would just be like, not like, maybe we talk about something else, because I was like trying to distract them from it because I didn't want a bunch of people to know what was happening. But anyway, yeah, more stories from the underbelly of the newsroom. But we own the building in an LLC. It's a 4-way partnership. And yeah, it's pretty straightforward. It, has its own bank account and there's like funding rounds and everybody chips in, and we are sort of Josh, by we, I mean Josh is the project manager. It just sort of worked out that way. So he's kind of the on the ground partner. So, we've also invested a lot of time in the building, which sort of plays into how our ownership of it is structured. And we feel very fortunate to have partners who are open to doing it that way. Yeah, I mean, for us, Pete Whitlock is our main business partner. We brought our friend Jody Gukas to the table, and he brought his friend Wesley to the table. But us and Pete are kind of the main two. And Pete owns a bunch of properties in Marshall, and was originally our opponent in this bidding process. We were trying to bid with a different backer, kind of. It just seemed so clear to me at the time that Pete was going to want to partner with us instead, which is crazy when you look back on it. But I was like, I don't know, let's just give beer and like team up. And that's what we did.
Love it.
And I think Josh remembers it a little bit differently. I think there was this moment where Josh felt like it might not work out in a different way, but he has like a funny way of telling this story. I'm not telling it right. But I don't know. For me, it always seemed, I don't know, maybe 2016 was just like the year of blind faith for me, because I remember thinking very clearly, like, we're just going to get a beer with this guy and his wife, and then he's going to want to be our business partner.
Yeah.
Like, duh, of course.
Yeah, and I find that absolutely fascinating. And also I love it as a strategy that oftentimes opponents are on the same team. They just don't know it yet. And I guess just we're very, very early in buying like a regular house. And my understanding is that like, I had always thought you needed a ton of money to put down for a regular house. And it turns out that you could do single digit percentages down. But my understanding is for when you buy through an LLC, you have to put 20% down or more. Is that, and it's like a much shorter mortgage? Is this true? Is this a misunderstanding? Loosely? And
I don't know as much about that. I think that's correct. We tried to buy an investment property at one point that we were really glad we didn't buy. It was a house. I recall that being correct, but our partnership actually paid cash for the building because it was only $90,000.
When we look at these real estate websites, we're like, and I look at its previous transactions, 2005, 2011, 2014. Some of the numbers are so low that it makes my head spin because the numbers now aren't low. So 90,000. Ha.
Yeah, and there's still, that was good for the time, but it was a jail in there.
Had work to do.
So, yeah, the first thing we did was rip out all the electrical and plumbing because there was no way we were going to save any of that. There was mold, there was like paint, like decades of paint that just had to be scraped and like blasted and with water and sand and acid and like it's been 4.5 years for a reason, you know?
Yeah.
So 90,000 seems like a steal, but also it was a jail.
Yeah. And is there a sort of projected launch date or opening date of the jail space?
They are putting mud on sheetrock right now.
What does that mean?
In there. So we are on the home stretch. We are really, 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 really close. And we are saying early 2021 for whatever that means, because who knows at this point. But yeah, we were very close.
Exciting. Yeah. Okay, so I want to go back. We talked a little bit about Carolina Flowers and then, of course, the jail, but Zadie's Market. You said that you came up with this idea, or you felt like you came up with this idea in 36 hours. Like, talk to us a little bit about how you got started here, how and why you came up with the idea, and what's going on at Zadie's.
Yeah, I mean, well, take yourself back to March and just recall what a mind trip it was. Every single day in March was like a million years. Because the story doesn't make as much sense if you don't kind of put yourself back in that headspace of like, were people going to be dying in the street? Like, I don't know. We didn't know. We really did not know what was going to happen. And we knew that businesses were about to have to close. We watched this wave coming out of New York and across the country from California and just waiting for the shoe to drop here in North Carolina. And wondering whether it would apply to us or not. As a flower farm, we were in a super nebulous sort of, are we agriculture? Are we not? Like, it depends who you ask. And even, it felt very controversial. And I understood immediately that, we could not close or we'd never reopen. We had too much invested in our spring crops. We had planted extremely heavily, and spring is it's a very lucrative season, but it's also a very expensive season. And so we could not afford to lose those crops. And B, I didn't want to. And I knew that, barring some miracle where the state came out and said outright, we're lumping floriculture in with the rest of agriculture, which basically did not happen in any other state, that I was going to have to freaking plant my flag and stand behind it. And I had no idea how hard of a time people were going to give me for that, because, remember there was an element of like public shaming early on, where if you tried to keep your business open and someone didn't think you should, they're going to talk about you on Facebook. And so, I think that luckily we avoided most of that, but there were whispers of it. And I think that, in some ways, there's two ways to tell this story. I mean, one is like, we had the infrastructure in place to help our fellow farmers, using our website and our delivery logistics systems, so that when they lost their restaurant clients, we were able to step in and offer our services. And it's a combination and a wonderful friendship, and something that I'm hugely passionate about. And the other way to tell the story is that you want a damn good argument for being an essential business, like get food. And so both of those things are true. It was sweet and it was and it was calculated at the same time, and that is me in a nutshell, I guess. I don't know.
Sweet and also very savvy.
And yeah, it really was. It was an answer to a series of questions about how we could use the resources that we had in an environment that was going to be very unpredictable. And so, I sort of sat down on Saturday and said, this is what we have. How can we use it? And I woke up on Monday morning and said, all right, grocery store, and then I think we had maybe 2 days. We were 2 days ahead of the shelter in place order or something like that.
Were you operating Carolina Flowers out of the building that you're in now? Okay.
Yeah, so we leased this building back in January or December or something. I don't know. We had another building previously, and it was much uglier and dirtier and less air conditioned than this one. This is a very nice building. It has hardwood floors, high ceilings, air conditioning. And it also had room for us to grow in the space. And that was another factor in terms of making the decision, was that, we're not going to be doing weddings out of this space clearly. So what are we going to use it for? We wound up doing a much higher volume of flower sales than I think that I realized we were going to do. And had I known that, in retrospect, I might have chosen differently. But the other problem that my family had to solve with COVID was that all of our leads for leasing the jail, this building that we've been working on for 4 years, and that my husband has really just, it's part of who he is now. All those leads dried up. And so that was not something that I was willing to let sort of roil in uncertainty while the world straightened itself out. Like, that was a decision that needed to get made quickly for everyone's sake, in our world family. So that certainly influenced the decision to create and keep Zadie's. On the first day of Zadie's, I was like, oh, this is a temporary thing. We help out our farmer friends. Like, it's easy to add lettuce to the website, whatever. Yeah. It's confusing from a branding perspective, but like, let's just roll with it. Because, this is probably worth pointing out that we were doing all the groceries through Carolina Flowers at that point. We didn't create the separate brand until a few weeks in, and I sort of, I don't know, like, John Fleer, yeah. You talked to him on your podcast. He's sort of my mentor, but he's also just my friend, and he has been since I was 23. So we, for some weird reason, we just we're think about the world the same way. And so we were sort of in this little unit of COVID pivot, but also crisis inspiration, because when the world is upside down, if you want to live in dreamland and come up with weird ideas that no one can tell you no, it's, I don't know, that's good for the creative entrepreneurial brain in a way. Yeah. I don't want to say I enjoyed it because it's excruciating, but yeah. I don't know.
No, I think there's something there, and I think in talking with other business owners in the past, one of the things that has come up, I don't want to say regularly, but enough where we've noticed sort of this trend is there have been a lot of businesses that started during a recession or during a really hard time in that person's life, and it's almost like because of these constraints or this these sort of forces, it forces you to think creatively, even when you're feeling stressed about it, but it's because you have to.
Right. Of course. Yeah. And the other thing is that I've seen this before. It's such a formative and pivotal time for me. Living through the last recession of the age that I was, definitely, first of all, you get this I will never let this happen to me mindset, and these people are idiots. I'm never going to make these kinds of choices that people made to tank the global economy, which, whether that's true or not, who knows? But I think I also had a much clearer vision of what was about to happen than a lot of people did, just because I was at such an impressionable point in my life and when that happened. And so I think that, the connection between this and 2008, even though the reasons are so different, understanding what economic uncertainty was going to mean was important.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it seems like you saw ahead around the bend, so to speak, because I think a lot of businesses, they might have pivoted, they might have started offering groceries or doing things differently, and then they were saying to themselves, well, this is only temporary. Everything's going to go back to normal in a month or two, and they're kind of holding out on that. But it seems like in many ways you went into it and then you're like, oh no, this is the real thing. I'm going to make this its own brand. And here we are months later, and you have sort of this whole concept. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's easy to say that having been right. I could have overreacted, and we could, be looking back on this so differently. I don't know why I was right when I could have been wrong. But and I wasn't right about everything. I mean, obviously it's been a hell of a ride, and we're experiencing a ton of like economic uncertainty in terms of, what predictions and modeling and all that stuff. I mean, everything looks like a freaking roller coaster, but so I don't know. That is the trend in a way.
I think it's a perfect opportunity to transition towards the future. And so modeling, forecasting, aspirational, or however you want to think about the future, what kind of things are coming up for you? So this is date stand for mid-October as we're recording this. It might be the end of the year by the time this episode comes out. But as you think about the end of 2020 and early days of 2021, what things are top of mind? Clearly, it's opening a prison for Let and Zadie's jail. Dang. I tried to find the right word and I grabbed the wrong one. A jail. Will that be like Airbnb style or a proper like bed and breakfast hotel? Okay.
Probably both. We would prefer to book it all independently, but people use Airbnb, so we'll see how it goes.
So, but yeah, well, I'll turn it again though. The future. What do you see? What are you excited about?
We are trying to build all of these businesses going forward so that it doesn't matter what happens. And the jail building specifically is designed so that we could go back into the worst possible scenario, the most restrictive possible scenario for shelter in place, which I don't think is going to happen. But, we could do that and still be whole and not lose a bunch of money. So, we've tried to build it so that, and by the same coin, everything is peachy by next spring and people are throwing money at us. I mean, I don't know, everybody's probably going to go to Europe and like not come here, but, we've tried to design it like so that whatever the future holds, we can hang. And we've tried to really invest in our staff and our resources and getting people involved who can support the vision and also be surrogates for me and Josh, so that literally if someone gets COVID, we can disappear for a few weeks and the thing keeps going. So all that stuff. I mean, in some ways it's just good business anyway. But to have an actual crisis kind of breathing smoke on you all the time is a good way to set it up. Yeah, I don't know. I
think that's great. Practically speaking, that means attempt to run profitably and throw money into a savings or checkings accounts for the business and not put yourself in a position where any one bad step is game over. Is that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that cash is important, but it's not the only important thing. I think it's probably less important than people think about when they're just starting out. I mean, I literally thought that when I quit my full-time job that I would be broke like next week, like that is how it seemed in my head. And it's not like that. Like, I don't know, you learn tricks, but the thing that you cannot just magic up out of nowhere is a really good team to help. So, if I think going forward, like I said, weighing the balance between money in the bank and people who are well trained and invested and enjoying themselves and believe in your mission. Like, I think that is probably more important for us, especially because we're in Marshall. I mean, we can't just like get another person like at the drop of a hat, we're hiring new farm managers right now, and it is like, I don't know, if I mess that up, like that is worse than running out of money. Making a bad hire for an important position like a farm manager position, like that's way worse than whoops, I overdrew the bank account.
Yeah. Well, time is.
I'm not trying to be like blasé about that stuff. Money is obviously what we use to keep the machine running. But
I think that's a great point.
Yeah, I do too. This is a totally random question, but it's one that I've had on my mind.
Oh, good,
when I went to the shop on Saturday, you had a lot of puzzles in the front of the shop, and I kind of geeked out about it because I love jigsaw puzzles. Tony knows I'm like a kind of obsessed. What's up with the puzzles? Are you just like a puzzle fan, or is there some sort of story behind why you have so many jigsaw puzzles in a flower market shop? I have no idea. I'm like very excited to hear this.
Well, puzzles they're not perishable. They ship very well. They are kind of like a single-use product in that, like, you can't do the same one over and over again. So if you theoretically were to build up a brand and a customer base for these things, it might, be possible to have really loyal customers who buy over and over, and maybe they wouldn't all have to be in Asheville because the puzzles ship so well. And, maybe you have this idea for like a really strong new brand that you might be able to launch as a separate business, and maybe you already have a really good logo that's been designed, and maybe you already bought the domain name, and you're really just needing to stockpile inventory.
Sarah, you sleuth.
I had no idea. Really, I had no idea. And I didn't mean to put you on the spot for that. I just literally, I'm a fellow puzzle lover. I told Tony, I'm like, she has these meta puzzles that I was geeking out about, which is the meta puzzle is a puzzle of a picture of someone doing a puzzle, right? That's what. Yeah. Anyways,
that's a good one.
Yeah.
No, but actually, we are going to launch a new brand this year.
Because there's not enough going on. I got it. I get you.
It's side hustle. It's fine. Once you get really good at websites, like, what's the difference between 2 and 6? I don't know.
That's a great point.
4 is different. But no, I am gonna do it again because fuck it. I don't know. Sorry, it's the radio. But also, I really like ideation, and that's probably what will destroy me in the end, is that I really like the first part of making a business.
That's great.
I want to see what happens if I don't tie myself to a perishable product that has to be hand delivered.
I'm very excited about it. We will follow up offline. I think that this is. I think that you're onto something. I when I think about businesses, the type of business that I always find most fascinating isn't exactly what you're pointing to, but it's the razors business. It's sell a handle, continually sell blades. Like that is a great business. You get one product that's like a
Yeah,
core, and
right.
then there's a subscription renewing, constantly consumed version. And you can, there's so many different versions of that type of business model, but razor blades are probably the case study. So excited for you there. I think it's time for a real quick speed round, Sarah.
Yeah, we're moving into our last little bit of the podcast, and we're going to ask you just a few questions that are meant to be more quick and not super speedy, but not overly thought out either. So I will kick us off. In your opinion, what is the most underrated flower?
Marigolds.
Tony Google's Marigold.
They're like the ones that are like, they're like in season right now, like the kind of, or I mean, they have all different colors.
I imagine
they're
yellow.
They're very fall flowers, right?
Yeah, orange and yellow and gold. They grow all summer. They're really prolific. They smell incredible. They last forever. You can dry them and press them and make garlands and dye and tinctures and blah, blah, blah. And they're really easy to grow.
Love it.
But it's the smell that does it for me. I really like the way they smell. Some
Nice.
people hate
Cool.
it.
Great. Is there a brand or business that you're absolutely heart eyes about right now and follow and think is cool?
That's a great question, actually. It's a hard question. My friend Natalie in San Diego has a flower shop called Native Poppy that I really look up to a lot. If you look at what they're doing, it is somewhat similar to what we're doing, and that's not an accident. I also really admire people who are doing like, you know, scaling sustainability. I don't have a great example off the top of my head, but I really appreciate that new thrust in business. And I feel like I am squandering an opportunity to like have a great answer.
Native Poppy sounds great, and you know, hashtag visit where. That's all I know for sustainability. She's our
right,
she's our
exactly. Nope.
point person for that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, lots and lots of them. I mean, I'm constantly like looking at what other people are doing. You know, you don't have to reinvent
It's
the
best
wheel.
when we don't. Throw your own thumbprint
right.
on the wheel, but don't reinvent it.
Yeah.
Right. I certainly did not make up the system that we are using. It's just sort of the future of commerce. And I think most people are realizing faster than they might have without COVID. But I think it was coming anyway. The sort of like anything you want to buy, you can buy online. And, you know, every mom and pop shop has a Shopify store and all that stuff.
Cool. Okay.
That's where we're headed.
Next question. This is a fill in the blank. The best thing about owning a business in the Asheville area, I will say, because you're in Marshall, is blank.
Working with other people.
The hardest thing about owning a business in the Asheville area is?
Specific to Asheville, I think one of the hardest things about owning a business right now is that people are so polarized about every damn thing. But that might just be the hardest thing about life. Like, and also this idea that you might destroy your business by like one wrong expression of opinion or whatever. And the like tyranny of the internet and all that stuff is really hard. I think maybe that the cost of living here is pretty high. and that makes it harder for small businesses to offer really wages that aren't just living wages, but that are comfortable professional wages. There's this idea that there's not a lot of professional jobs in Asheville, and I think that that could be different if we could figure out how to address the cost of living, or pay people more or whatever. Like I don't think it's I don't think it's a talent and ideas problem. I think it's like a money problem. I don't know. I believe in paying people more than I pay myself, probably. Certainly by the hour, more than I pay myself. And like having come from an industry where highly trained and skilled professionals were extremely underpaid, and where executives and ad people were literally taking money away from the talent that created the product. I never want to do that to anybody. So better wages for everyone.
Nice. And
including me.
Yeah, heard. Well, the I guess second to last question, you might have a similar answer for this, but if we had a magic wand or someone in our audience had a magical wand, what one thing would you ask for right now?
Commuter rail.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I just recently rode a motorcycle up the old highway to Marshall, and that, like, along the French Broad Drive is my favorite thing that I've done so far. I didn't know that road led to Marshall. We had always taken that.
Mm-hmm. It's gorgeous, but
it was. I was nervous, but we had only ever taken, I guess it's 26, like the proper highway to Marshall. What a beautiful little windy riverside road. So commuter rail, like the Hudson Rail line out of Grand Central would be gorgeous. Here's to that.
Or underground power lines too would actually be good. We have above ground power lines in Marshall, and it's really ugly. So I don't know, magic wand person. There's some infrastructure ideas.
Amazing, love it.
And then the last is if people who listen to this wanted to connect with you digitally, how would you ask them to do it? Where would you send them?
Get in touch with our mutual friend Joanna. I'm actually I don't know. No, I do. Like I said, I love working with other people. I'm really hard to reach at the moment. We are just getting inundated, which is really good and flattering and amazing, and I love it, and it's what we want. I am a super flake. So if you want to reach me personally, I do have an email address, and sometimes I check it. And usually that's like when I'm doing something else with my hands and I can't possibly respond. So your transmissions will be received, but they will not be responded to. I just sound like the biggest jerk.
Go to Marshall and hunt Emily down physically is the answer.
Look for a jail. She'll be nearby.
I don't know. I might. Joanna made me hide back here in the back for this interview. But anyway, my email is emily@carolinaflowers.com. And that is way better than Instagram DM. Please do not DM me on Instagram unless it is a hard-eyed.
Perfect. Yeah. I love the clear instructions.
Yeah, when my mom begins to follow you, that's all you'll get.
That's all I want. We have a landline for the first time ever for the business, which is great. And you can call it anytime and someone will answer, and we have a voicemail and someone will check it. So,
Perfect.
Cool. So we'll have links to all of the known internet locations, but don't expect correspondence directly from Emily.
No, I really do. I really do want to. I shouldn't joke. I mean, I don't know. I'm just trying to be realistic.
Someone will reply, but not. Not perfect. And now, I mean, I love it. I think that's absolutely true. I think. They say that the two types most successful people in the world are either the fastest to reply on email or will never reply on email. And I think that is, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Well, I admire the fastest type, and I would like to be that type. I recognize that I am not, and I'm sorry in advance.
Need not.
Know thyself.
I don't know. End on a more flattering note.
Yeah, well, so if you're not following us on YouTube, there's an absolutely gorgeous couple flowers behind Emily. What are we looking at here?
Let's see. These are some breakout dahlias that are hot pink for some reason. At the end of the season, things start to turn all kinds of crazy colors. And these are cafe au lait dahlias here.
Beautiful.
And then this is a deep cut. This is maybe one of my favorites. Talk about underrated flowers. This is actually a variety of gladiola called an Abyssinian gladiola. So it's much smaller than your typical gladiola. It's a lot more dainty. I think it's really elegant and unique. That's a good one. Easy to grow.
So one was pink, one was like a cream white, and the other one was different looking and gorgeous. If you're not on the YouTube channel, head over there now. But that was a wonderful podcast episode. Thank you so much for being our guest.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks, guys.
Cool.
I appreciate it.